Welcome to Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen, a bi-monthly podcast designed to teach the searchers, seekers, and spiritually curious the basics of metaphysics and new thought. They are all about the basics, but they are not basic bitches. Now, here are your hosts, April Darley and Jen Merkel.
Thank you for joining us today on Spiritual Basics Podcast. My name is Jen Merkel.
And I'm April Darley.
So April, I have something really exciting to talk about. I couldn't wait to tell you, but I promised, I was going to talk about it, but you don't know what it is because I wanted to be a surprise.
Bring it on.
Our show has a milestone. We hit a milestone, and it's super exciting because I think it's like legitimizes us.
Okay.
Not that we're not already legitimized.
Do tell.
Legitimate. We got our very first thumbs down.
What? We got a hater. Yay.
Yeah, can you believe it? But I do think that, everybody gets that. It's like when you get your first bad review as a business or something. So we can celebrate.
That's right. We got a hater. Somebody figured out we are not for them. That's okay.
I know. So along those lines, for our faithful listeners, you guys that tune in all the time, please remember to subscribe and give us some love, give us some thumbs up or some stars, or give us a review, however you're listening, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify. I don't think you can review or rate on Spotify, but you can subscribe.
So we love words of affirmation, so give us some love.
That is very true. April especially is a words of affirmation person.
It's my love language. Bring it on, y'all.
The more you can send us love, the better. We try to send you love every time we do a show. And the other thing I was thinking too, so I edit this after we do it within a couple days, and I'm just so tired of cutting out all my ums. Like I haven't done it, but I've been talking about how I want to make a big sign for myself to put right up on my computer that has the word or absolutely or a couple other things. And I'm like, gosh, someone should invent a drinking game. Every time Jen says
oh yeah, that's a good one.
Y'all be really drunk by the time we got to the real subject matter.
I just do dramatic pauses. I don't say a lot, but Jen has to cut out my long pauses.
I'll tell you, there is something else that I cut out of yours that I haven't ever told you about, but sometimes after your long pause, just before you talk, you go, well, you have a little.
Right. I got to smack. I got to smack y'all.
You're a smacker.
I'm a smacker.
Oh, we are silly tonight and we're not even drinking. So how about that? That's another mistake I'll never make. Well, actually drinking during a podcast isn't so bad, but it depends on how much you drink and whether what time you have to get up the next morning. So
it's true. And I think our F-bomb quota might significantly increase. At least it will on this end.
I don't hear that a lot from you. I hear a lot more from me, but
because I don't drink. When I drink, it's like every third word's an F-bomb pretty much.
We need to drink together more, girl. On or off the air, podcast, whatever.
It's been that kind of week. How's your week been, you guys out there in listener land? Because it's been quite a week.
Yeah, it's been busy. What's going on in the stars? Is that why we're so busy right now?
Oh yeah, here's my. Sorry, I smacked there. You're gonna have to cut that out.
I'm
totally gonna be hyper aware of that. And
I know that's kind of why I never told you.
It's Mars retrograde right now, so that can bring up some anger. That can bring up some listlessness, lack of motivation. You feel sluggish. Your energy is low, and I think with what's going around at lots of different places in the world, that's not helping. Yeah. So a lot of people are just a little extra frustrated with that, and it's on Mars.
When does Mars go out of retrograde? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, late November. I want to say mid to late November. So it's going to be in there for about 8 weeks.
Maybe that'll bring us a really nice Christmas. I think we could use that.
Well, I think in October we're due for another Mercury retrograde.
Well, that happens 3 times a year, though, right?
It does. Thankfully, we are not going to have a Mercury retrograde near Christmas because that's really awful because you're not supposed to buy any electronics and expensive luxuries at Christmas. So we've had several Christmases where Mercury retrograde has just kind of gummed up the works there for both travel and gift buying.
Speaking of which, guys, April and I were going over our show schedule, like subjects that we're going to be doing for the future. And we have some really, really cool things coming up we're excited about. But in December, we are going to put out an episode about the best gifts for each zodiac sign. I'm so I'm ready to plan that tomorrow. I'm that excited about it.
We only talked about Aries and we were vastly different. So it's going to be a fun show for sure.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. So that's coming up in a little while. So speaking of show, let's get to the show. This episode. Oh crap. I said, that means I got more editing to do.
Everybody take a shot. Jen said,
I should have an episode where I just never edit, but this is not going to be that episode because it's already going to be long as it is. So
this is the drinking game episode. So every time you say, I'm going to go shot.
We should do that, but then we should both have cocktails to drink from if we're going to do that. The funny thing is, the more I drink, probably the less I would say, so it's kind of ironic. Anyway, so April, since we're talking about ghosts, tell me, what are your favorite ghost movies?
You know, I really had to think about this for a bit. The first one that came to me was The Haunted Mansion. And
I've never seen The Haunted Mansion, which I know doesn't surprise you, but what is that about? Remind me.
So it's my favorite ride at Disneyland.
Oh,
but they kind of made a movie just based off the ride at Disneyland. And the premise of it is there is this creepy old mansion, and the guy that owns it sees, well, he's, clearly dead, but he sees a picture of this woman who looks just like his long lost dead love. So he lures her to the mansion. She and her husband and family come in, and then it's, the ghosts start coming out, and I don't want to ruin it for you, but the Haunted Mansion, it's got Eddie Murphy in it, and it's just a really great thing. It's got a wonderful fortune teller crystal ball scene. I don't want to ruin it for you, but I just love the Haunted Mansion, and the Haunted Mansion is like my aesthetic. So remember when I'm doing these holistic shows, and you helped me pick out my new tablecloth for the holistic show because it had this Haunted Mansion vibe. So I swear, if I own a Victorian house one day, I will have at least one room in that house that's got Haunted Mansion type vibe.
That would be super cool.
Decor, right?
Oh, do the whole house that way.
Yeah.
How about you? You're always at that ride.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any others other than just that one, or?
I do. So Ghostbusters has a special place in my heart.
I hate Ghostbusters. I hate it so much. I'm really an anti-Bill Murray. Like, I just don't like him. I don't find him funny ever, but that's just my sense of humor. But yeah, I don't like Ghostbusters.
So it was my 12th birthday, and I rented Ghostbusters and Goonies and had like snacks and stuff. So I loved that birthday, and Ghostbusters sort of has a special place in my heart for that.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then A Christmas Carol. It's probably one that doesn't come top of mind when you think Ghost Story, but it's one of my top 10 favorite movies ever.
It's really a great movie.
Yeah, I've never seen a bad version of it. I love it. And every year it's my tradition that I have to watch that.
Well, it's a great life lesson. I mean, he goes through the different phases and learns a lot about life, really. And it's pretty interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
There's one the BBC did last year, and it was unusual because it went into Ebenezer's his backstory a little bit in a different way, as if he were an abused child at that boarding school. And so a lot of his issues stemmed from that abuse. So it was a new spin on it, and I got inspired to write this blog about it. It's called Ebenezer Scrooge, a Case Study. And it's breaking down why Ebenezer did these things and how he turned out the way he did because of his own trauma. And
that's like doing inner child work, huh?
Right. So what about you? What are some of yours?
So I'm not a big scary movie person. I hate scary or murder movies or gory movies. I can't stand that. I think part of that is the empath in me. When if I see someone who's about to get stabbed, I can't watch because then I feel like I'm getting stabbed, I don't want that. Even though I know it's not true, it's just an actor, but probably the scariest movie that I actually like is Poltergeist. It's just creepy, right? It's not necessarily scary. It's a little bit suspenseful, but it's just overall creepy.
Well, I can tell you as a kid, it scared the crap out of me. And I didn't even want to eat steak for like months because of that whole maggot steak scene.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. Enough to turn somebody into a vegetarian.
It definitely stayed with me. I remember when I watched it, I was pretty freaked out.
And then Beetlejuice is another one. That's kind of a fun movie. Yeah. I thought that was entertaining. I really loved Michael Keaton at the time. I thought he had so many, he had a lot of great movies at the time, but that one was just fun. And my favorite, like when they break out into song and like the main character, I can't remember her name, but she's like, what's happening to me? Why am I singing this? And then at the end, it was like nothing happened. They're like, oh, well, and they went on with their lives. I'm like, okay. But probably my very, very, very favorite ghostly movie is The Sixth Sense. That's such a great movie. And I hate to give a spoiler. I'm sure if you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, you probably already know anyway. But I will tell you, the funny thing is with me, even when I started watching the movie, I was like, I wonder if he is actually dead. That happened to, like, I thought about that a couple of minutes into that. I'm like, that would be a pretty interesting twist in the movie. And so when it actually happened, the people I was watching were like, wow, that was mind-blowing. I'm like, oh, yeah, I kind of thought that might happen. Like,
that's because you're an Aquarius. My mind was blown, and I'm like, what? And Night Shyamalan is the bomb. He's so good.
Yes, such a great movie for sure. So before we start talking about the different ghostly things we're going to talk about this month, I should say this episode, this is originally airing in early October, so that's why we picked this subject. But I have a couple references that I wanted to mention because some of the information that we're going to present is from these resources, and they have some really good additional information. So if you're one of those people that actually enjoys going down a rabbit hole, the two sites that I would recommend are Atlas Obscura and legendsofamerica.com. I'll drop links like I usually do so you can look up, and as we go through, some of that information is from there. So first of all, the main question we should really try to answer are ghosts real? And my opinion is, of course, they're real.
Yeah, totes my goats, 100%.
If there wasn't, then I guess we would end the show right now. In 2005, Gallup did a poll where they found that 37% of Americans believe in haunted houses. And 46% were adamant no, but 16% were unsure. So that means really more than half of America either believes in haunted houses or believes that they could be possible. So that's quite a bit. And interestingly enough, 32% believe that dead people can come back as ghosts, 19% were unsure, and 48% were a hard no. And just a little side note here, 21% believe in witches and 25% believe in astrology, just for comparison and also because it's a cool fact. So who can see ghosts? In my opinion, I think the more open-minded people are more likely to see ghosts because skeptics can find problems in anything. And if you really don't believe in something, you can talk yourself out of believing it.
Sure.
So historically, people have really been fascinated with ghosts. They were often reported in the Victorian era.
So in the Victorian era, you had the spiritualist movement. And in that movement, you saw a resurgence of anything dealing with the occult. Ancient Egypt, Aleister Crowley was around this time, the Golden Dawn, seances, mediumship, all of that stuff. People would hold seance parties and salons where they would talk about spiritualist things. Archaeologists did a lot of grave robbing during that time and brought these strange artifacts from faraway lands, but people were just really interested. And not only that, it's like their imaginations went wild with the Gothic, because Bram Stoker with Dracula, Mary Shelley with Frankenstein, we're talking about all of these different time periods where it was just something. We were fascinated with the mystery and the mysterious. And one of the pastimes is to tell these stories. And most of these stories were told verbally, but eventually they became written down. And things like Charles Dickens' A Christmas Story, it's just all sorts of fabulous stuff. And you've noted here in 1848, the Fox sisters of New York heard a series of tappings and they communicated with a spirit. And in New York, even now, they have Lilydale, which is a community that's full of psychics. And I don't know when Lilydale started or if it's in New York as well, or if the Fox sisters were part of Lilydale, but it's a really interesting history there with the Victorian times.
Also, the steam-powered printing press was invented during that time, so that made it easier to put things down in writing and print them en masse rather than individually one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
These stories became more widespread for that reason.
And it wasn't just the nobility or the rich that had access to all these mythic
Yeah,
characters.
it became more accessible to all walks of life.
So speaking of Victorian age, you guys know that I love Victorian homes. And Victorian homes sometimes can look creepy and are often haunted. So if you have listened to the episode where I talk about my life, you know that I grew up in kind of a Victorian farmhouse type home in the Deep South. But after the Civil War, you had a lot of poverty. A lot of these homes were abandoned. And it used to be these homes were just the height of wealth and status and prestige. But when they turned toward neglect, the creepy aspect of them, it's almost like that we started to get fascinated. It was that potential, that creepiness was just there. And if some abandoned houses in general just have that, just feeling about them where there's something amiss and it just gets our imagination going. And the 1930s, there were different types of architectural styles, but the Victorian homes just seemed to be a symbol of something that was, kind of haunted.
Old and antiquated. And back at those times too, that's kind of a turning point in the industrial age where there was fewer coal-powered things, less soot in the air. There were better working conditions coming to fruition. So some of those Victorian homes became kind of a symbol of the old age or the old ways, and people kind of wanted to move away from them, and therefore a lot of those houses did become abandoned or were just considered creepy and gross.
I mean, plus you've got the Civil War, so there were battles going everywhere,
right,
all over the country. So you never know where 50 years after the war, you might have had a new build on this complete battleground where lots of people died, and you've got that energy stuck in there.
Right. So what's the deal with ghosts and why do they exist? Well, ghosts often are not ready to let go of their earthly life, and we call that an earthbound spirit. They're making a choice to kind of hang out in the earthly realm rather than pass on to where they're supposed to go next. They might not want to break ties with their family, belongings, or home. And these earthbound spirits might choose to haunt the places they died. They might choose to haunt a place that they lived or somewhere they frequented when they were alive. Usually ghosts pass tragically or suddenly. Not always, but that's usually what you hear about when you hear about sightings. Things like murders or horrible accidents. For example, ghosts of people who have drowned often appear soaking wet, as if they just stepped out of the water. That is not uncommon for those types of sightings. And so it might be a conscious choice that they make to stay, but some ghosts actually don't know that they're dead. And some ghosts are helpful and friendly, and some, at least not harmful, but some are a little more scary, and some can even be ill-willed.
So you mentioned the sixth sense earlier, and in that, the little boy saw them as they died. They were bloody, they were gory, they were awful. So when I started seeing ghosts, I did not see them that way, but I also made a conscious effort not to see them that way.
And I think most of the time when you see a sighting, you don't see them like with a knife in their chest or something like that. You'll see them how they want you to see them, how they live their lives. That's
right.
Most often what happens, for sure.
I agree. I did see one woman who drowned that was dripping wet, but other than that, I really didn't see scary, gory things.
I think also, though, that might have to do with the fact that those are the type of spirits that don't know they've passed. Even in the movie, that's what was the case. Like the bicyclist, right, that came up to him in the car, he didn't even know that he was dead. So that might have something to do with it as well. They're not choosing their appearance in a certain way because they don't know any better.
Yeah. So can spirits get stuck between realms, or can they attach to people? So the first question, can spirits get stuck between realms? This is a matter of debate or opinion. My opinion is yes, they can. Sometimes a spirit becomes earthbound because they're afraid of what they did in their past life, and they're afraid to pass on to the other side because they don't know what they're going to find when they get there. And some religions have a judgment concept where you could have eternal suffering if you led a bad life. So it might be better for them to stay earthbound by their logic than to face eternal torment or punishment in the unknown.
But do you think that's getting stuck? Like, we're talking about getting stuck, or do you think that's a choice that they're making? Because I think if it's a choice they're making, I don't personally see that as someone who's stuck between realms.
I see their fear as keeping them stuck.
Okay.
That they are unable to move forward because of their fear. So to me, that meets the definition of stuck. It's possible to be kind of stuck between here or there. And others have talked about a purgatory type place where if you weren't good enough to get to the others, like heaven-ish, or you weren't bad enough for hell, sometimes you would get stuck in this purgatory. And I can't remember I want to say it was Sylvia Brown that wrote about this. And she talked about if a spirit didn't feel it was good enough to pass on to the other side, it was stuck in a gray place, and which was basically kind of like purgatory. And that spirit could leave at any time, but they had to believe they were worthy to move on. And if you didn't have, and you work like I do with so many different people with anxiety and low self-worth and low self-esteem. If you don't believe that you're worthy as a human, you probably aren't going to believe that you're worthy enough for bliss eternally either.
Right.
And so those people can almost get stuck in a purgatory place just by the lack of belief in themselves. And now for the second piece, can they attach to people? Again, my opinion is yes. Ghosts and entities can attach to people and also attach to objects. And it is one of the reasons that I have this really quirky thing where I don't like to buy secondhand things. No secondhand furniture. I have bought secondhand clothes, but especially objects like furniture and things. Because I'm a little squeamish. I mean, because I'm an empath, I can sense that stuff. I do cleanse it if I buy secondhand stuff. I always will sage it or cleanse it.
Absolutely.
I don't ever bring it in the house without doing some kind of scan and cleanse and blessing over it. But I am a bit squeamish about it because there are a lot of haunting stories out there where you go to a thrift store, you buy some beautiful mirror, and then next thing you know, bam, your house is haunted.
I might be mistaken, but I thought you and I had a conversation before where you said you enjoy antique shopping.
Oh, I like to look, but I don't necessarily buy.
Because I was just thinking, I'm due. Like I feel the itch to go antique shopping. I have to do that sometime soon. And I was going to ask you, but if you're like, hell no, then okay.
I will totally go with you. I have no problem like going. And I'm not to say that I wouldn't ever buy if it's just this amazing piece, but I will be saging it and checking it out and like scanning it and all sorts of things. And one thing about the Victorian era is they had jewelry. They often made jewelry, and I can't remember the name of it, but they used human hair from deceased loved ones where they would make beautiful pendants and rings and things. And you can have ghostly energy attached to that. So if you ever watched the TV show Supernatural on there, they're like, well, if you have anything was from the deceased person, their bones or their hair, that the spirit is kind of drawn to that because it represents a living element.
Google says they call it mourning jewelry, like a mourning brooch.
Okay. A mourning brooch. And I've seen examples of them, and they're gorgeous, but a little creepy.
I
creepy
think,
sometimes.
yeah, I can't get into that. I just, no, I don't want any physical pieces of my relatives. I know I'm digressing a little, but that's their physical body, and that's
Mhm.
not, that's who
Mhm.
they are on earth, but I'm not really attached to that. And I don't know. Just
Well,
weird.
it goes like, and Southerners have some interesting traditions as well. I don't know that they do it so much anymore, but back when I was a kid, every funeral you went to, you take somebody, the family is taking pictures of the deceased person in their coffin, and they keep those pictures.
Yeah,
And
please never do that to me. No,
right?
thank you.
And in that Victorian time, they were propped up and they were posed. And you have these pictures, these death portraits, and that was a popular thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen the pictures, and it's not pretty. They still do it in some countries, apparently.
So I haven't been to a funeral in a very long time where they were taking pictures in the coffin of the deceased, but I can tell you in the Deep South, when I was a kid, that was a very, very popular thing to do.
Wow. It's like Weekend at Bernie's, but somber.
Yes. Now there's probably laws against posing your relatives and taking pictures of them.
So now let's talk a little bit about what ghost sightings are like. In April, growing up in a Victorian home, and just in an area where they had Victorian homes like that, I know you've had your share of ghost sightings, but
I have.
I really haven't heard any of that from you. So I'd love to hear about it.
So I'm going to try to tell some different stories than I did from my awakening episode. But
Yes.
when I was a kid, it was footsteps in the kitchen. I would hear a lot. So you can hear these phantom type noises, that strange sounds, these knocking, singing, creaky floors. But I would hear someone walking in the kitchen at night. And I knew my parents were not it, right? They were in bed. They were not walking around. I've even gotten up in the middle of the night and looked. Nobody was in the kitchen. And we would hear, my mom tells the story of one day she heard knocking on the door. She went to get up and answer the door. There's no one there. And to get to our front door, you would have had to open a screen door, walk down a long porch, open another screen door, and then physically knock on the door. So by the time my mom would have gotten to the door, there's really no way that someone could have ran through like 2 doors without us hearing them. And we lived in the middle of the country as well. So it was just a strange, ghostly knock.
Wow.
I would have my stuff moved all the time. My bike was rarely where I left it. So just things would pick up and move. One night I was cleaning my room. Like I was a kid, I had a messy room. My mom laid down the law. I got to clean it. So I spent kind of all day cleaning it. Everything was perfect. I turn out the lights and I hear all these books hitting the floor. And I'm like, I do not want to get up and pick up these books. I'm just going to do it in the morning. Morning comes, I wake up, the room is spotless. There are no books on the floor.
Wow.
And I can guarantee you my mom did not sneak into my room and clean up my room, right? That was my responsibility.
Maybe it was brownies from the previous episode we talked
Who
about.
knows? It could have been. Could have been
Just
a
kidding.
fairies. My bedroom, someone did die. The previous owner of the house did die in what was my bedroom.
Right.
So I did have interesting experiences in that room. But I know that you've listed like hearing sounds, singing, speaking. I have also had olfactory, where you can smell things like phantom scents.
Yeah, a lot of times people can smell perfume, and not necessarily perfume of people they know, but they might smell just a perfume and feel a sense of somebody being there.
Mm-hmm. I've had this with flowers, and it was my Aunt Jackie always had these gardenia bushes near her house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at school one day and I'm smelling these gardenias and I'm like, oh, that's my dead Aunt Jackie. Like, I'm like, hey, Aunt Jackie. So I have certainly had that.
Have you ever seen any like strange shadows, light patterns, or orbs? I know that sometimes you actually see them, and sometimes people see them in photos.
I have, yes. Especially when I went to Ireland. So in 2010, you guys know, if you listen to the show, I've been to Ireland 9 times. And in 2010, I went twice. But my first time in 2010, I was by myself and I'm touring the old Dublin. I think Dublin has been around since the 1200s in some form or fashion. So you can take a tour into the old city walls of Dublin. So when I'm in there, I just get this feeling there's stuff in this tunnel with me. So I'm taking pictures and then I look at these pictures. It's like so many orbs in this picture. And places like Dublin, these old cities, even old cities in the US, you just get these vibe when you are there. You just know. But I've also seen shadow people out of the corner of my eye. It is a shadow person that flits across. And you can do a lot of Googling about shadow people. There's an entire lore about shadow people. So I have seen shadow people, plenty of orbs and pictures. And some of that, for me, the ghostly type orbs show up as white in my pictures versus things like fairy orbs where they are different colors.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one photograph. I was in med school. 4 of my friends were posing. They took the picture. Above our heads, there was this huge misty form. And I didn't sense it. We didn't know, but it's the outline of kind of a person. It's almost like Casper, what you would imagine Casper to be.
Where was that picture taken? Like, was it
Arizona?
in an old building?
No, it was Arizona. It was downtown Tempe somewhere.
There are some older buildings there. And quite honestly, it doesn't have to be an old place to be haunted. It's just that's the more common place.
Mm-hmm. So those are just a couple of things that I've experienced.
A lot of people talk about how they see apparitions, like human forms, right? Or sometimes partial forms, like part of their body, like their torso. But objects like sunken ships and vehicles can also appear as apparitions. And then a lot of people also feel like a drop in temperature or sometimes feel something touching them or even get sleep paralysis themselves. I know a lot of people talk about, I had a conversation with some people recently and people were talking about some sleep paralysis that they experienced. And some of these people were like, yeah, I felt a hand reach out and grab my wrist and I couldn't move it. And I was like, yee, like, I don't want to hear about
that would freak me out. Like,
yes,
I am so happy that has not happened to me, for sure.
And of course, also you hear about this and it kind of goes along with poltergeist is the electrical mishaps. So flickering lights or the TV going on and off, all those are real signs of how people see ghosts. And then the next question that we pose here is how can you tell if a place is haunted aside from, experiencing seeing a ghost? And one of the scientific ways, or probably the scientific way that people usually would go to is by measuring the magnetic fields in the area to see if there are stronger fields or lots of fluctuation. That usually indicates a presence. And the device they use is called a magnetometer, which when I was Googling that, it came up with the word Tesla. So somehow Tesla is involved with magnetometers too, which is kind of cool.
Tesla was a huge believer in the occult. He's just a really fascinating guy.
Very innovative thinker. Another thing too is if you watch your pets, do your pets, when you look at them, does it look like they're looking at something that's right there and you can't see it? Or do they inexplicably suddenly run out of the room or hide? I know cats can do that a lot.
I was reading something recently where they talk about cats are called psychopomps. And they're one of the species that can straddle this world and the next. And some people will say psychopomps ferry souls from one realm to the next. But it talked about how cats are, where dogs are the physical protectors of the home, cats are the spiritual protectors of the home.
Yes,
because
I have heard that.
Right? It's like their eyes are set up to see lower frequencies and lower light spectrums, and that they end up protecting the home from malicious spirits. So that was really cool.
If you want professional help, you can contact a legitimate qualified paranormal investigator. Just be really wary of scams because like anything, but I think especially with matter that is subjective like this, people can sometimes take advantage of you. And I did hear at some of the sites that I saw, it says they usually conduct the investigation for free. I think it's just because there are so many amateurs out there that are so passionate about it. They know a lot about it and they know what they're doing. So it's kind of what they do for fun. If they find out that you might have a haunted place, they might come over and do a little assessment for you for free. You can also find mediums or spiritual psychics that can find this out for you as well. It's not something that I personally do, but there, like anything, there are different types of mediums, there are different types of psychics, and there are some that enjoy this type of work and specialize in it. So the next thing we want to talk about, I'm super stoked about this part. How can you communicate with ghosts? And I guess because I'm a medium, that's why it's interesting. But there was a medium in the 1800s, and his name was Jonathan Coons. He was a spiritual medium. And again, like April said, back then there were a lot of seances happening at the time. And there was a problem where, which actually it's a problem anytime, not just then, where when spirits would talk, they would kind of talk in a really quiet whisper.
Yes.
So it was really, really quiet. And the way a seance looked was people were around a table, there was a medium there, and the medium would channel the spirit and start talking, but people were barely straining to hear. So this gentleman, Jonathan Coons, invented what he called the spirit trumpet. And it looks like a cone, often made of metal, sometimes made of paper. But it was a big cone, almost looked like, if you think of like the cheerleaders back in the 1950s, they had their megaphone. It's just a big cone, right? That's kind of what these things look like, maybe a little bit narrower. And what they would do once the seance was in full bloom and the spirit was known to be there, the medium would take out these spirit cones and put them out, and they would start floating up in the air. They'd float up like toward the ceiling and kind of move around the room. Sometimes they'd move slowly, sometimes kind of dart around the room. All the while, the medium is communicating what the spirit is talking about. And then as soon as the spirit splits, the cones fall right to the ground, right to the floor, the table, or atop of somebody's head.
Well, I totally would have loved to have one of these spirit cones, because when I was in full bloom with my mediumship stuff, seeing ghosts, going a little crazy, on that same trip to Ireland, I was in a bed and breakfast in County Clare near Bunratty Castle. And that night, I turn out the lights, I start to hear the whispers. And just like you said, they're very faint. So yeah. I'm straining to hear the whispers. And it got so bad that I'm like, I got to go to sleep. So I put earplugs in. But that is it was aggravating to me during that time because I couldn't hear them. And the whispers were coming in with my outer ear, not through my inner ear. So right. I was being driven a little bit crazy with the low hum whisper. I would have loved a spirit trumpet.
Now I know what to get you for Christmas.
Yes. Put that on your Taurus gift list.
You can put it
on your trumpet.
You can put it on your shelf behind you of your little decorative items. You remind me of Andy Cohen on Bravo, where you start getting a collection and building a shelf behind you.
Yes.
Actually, I have a shelf behind me too. I should do that too.
Don't be a shelf hater.
So another way you can communicate is just sitting still and quietly listening for them, talking to them. Talk to them and ask them a question, and then listen for the answer. You can also use divination tools. We talked about divination tools in a previous episode, things like Ouija boards, but also there's something called a planchette. And that is actually, if you have a Ouija board, it's that little piece that you move around. It's shaped kind of like an upside down heart almost, and it usually has a hole in it. And the planchette, when you use it as a divination tool, you put a writing instrument in it, like a pencil or a pen, and you move it around, and apparently it helps you to write. So that's one way that you can communicate. Also, table tapping. So it's similar to what the Fox sisters did, develop a code with spirits. Of course, you can always hire a spiritualist medium to do a seance for you. But if you still want to do something DIY, you can get a digital audio recorder for what's called EVP, which is electronic voice phenomenon. And that all this is a fancy way of saying spirits talking to you through your recording device. So honestly, I think you could probably use your phone if you wanted to.
Sure.
But it's kind of like the difference between us, we're using professional microphones to speak into this podcast so that you're not listening to a lot of crazy noise or poor sound quality. We could just use the microphone that's on our laptop, but then it's going to sound horrible. So the better quality you can use, probably the better results you're going to have. But again, you could certainly just use your phone. Where I first heard about this, actually, there's a show on the Travel Channel called Kindred Spirits. And it's Amy Bruni and Adam Berry. And what they do is they're paranormal investigators. They go into a home. Amy is a medium, and she would do something, for example, sit on a bed in a room because she felt a presence there. She's like, I want to try to communicate with the spirit. So she would have a recording device with her, and her partner, Adam, would be in another room, and he would be monitoring some things, but they would usually also have one of those magnetometers that we talked about that measures the electromagnetic fields. She would ask the spirit a question. Like, what is your name? And then she would pause, and she wouldn't hear the answer, but she would go on to the next question. Why are you here? And then she would pause, whatever. And after a while, she and Adam would sit down in a quiet place, and pretty much immediately, not really after a while, they'd sit down and they would listen to the recording, and you would hear her talking in the same volume. What is your name? And then you would hear an answer like, April. And maybe she said April. Oh my gosh, it's April. And then they'd say, why, the question, why are you here? And you'd hear something like, mad. Like, like, oh, they're mad, so it's they're usually one or two words that are answers, but it's a pretty cool show. So if you want to look it up, it's probably out there somewhere on a DVR and on demand. But it's something you really could do yourself and just see what happens.
The thing with some of those shows is I feel like they're baiting the ghosts, like purposely trying to like piss them off, I'm like, that's not really a good plan. So all you folks at home, please don't do that. Try to be.
That's true, but here that's what I liked about this show is they were actually really respectful to the ghosts, and they were invited into there are some that are like in their face and make the ghosts mad, right. and they don't like that. That's not their style. This couple, they're not actually a romantic couple, they're friends, but their goal is to find out why the spirit is there and why they're doing what they're doing, so that they can either help the homeowner to get rid of the spirit or at least somehow resolve what's going on so that they can live with the spirit, which kind of brings us, as a perfect segue to talk about our next question, was how can you get rid of a ghost? So I'd pose the question first, do you really want them to leave? Or do you just want to be in a more livable situation? Because not all ghosts are ill-willed. And like we said, not all ghosts know that they've died. So they might be banging around in your kitchen, making a whole lot of noise, leaving the cupboards open, and they don't even realize they're disturbing you. So you could, if you wanted to DIY, just go ahead and firmly but nicely tell them to leave. Or ask them to change their behavior. Tell them how it's affecting you. You might have to actually tell them that they're dead so that they can... again, they don't know that they're dead.
This reminds me of that movie, The Others, with Nicole Kidman. Again, it's this old manor house, and she was like, oh, I think there's ghosts in the house. And it's this whole movie, and then it's got another one of those twists where they are the ghosts. And they're just not on the same realm of the people who actually live in the house. So there's just a mismatch there. Spoiler alert, Jen has not seen that one either, no. And I totally blew it for her.
Well, thank you so much for that.
A good show.
Yeah, like when I was Googling ghost movies, that one came up as one of the top ones.
It was good. It was suspenseful.
Yeah.
Give it a whirl.
One thing to remember is if you're trying to get rid of a ghost, don't use things that will attract ghosts, which would be things like Ouija boards or seances. That actually attracts them and makes them more powerful because it brings their energy in. So, like I said, if your purpose is to get rid of them, don't do that. And another way you can get rid of them is through space clearing. So you can smudge, you can use sage or something else using crystals. Crystals, I've never really used crystal to clear ghostly energy out of a space, but I'll use it to protect myself against unwanted energies. Things like black tourmaline or onyx is good for that, or smoky quartz. But you can also hire a professional to do the space clearing for you.
One of the shows I love, like when I was awakening, is Psychic Kids. I know I've talked about it on previous episodes, but they do a lot of boundary teaching in there. So you want to, as Jen mentioned, you want to stay firm, but realize this is your space. You are the living, right? So you kind of get to make the rules a little bit, and you can set the rules of your space. And most spirits, if they're benevolent, if they're not harmful, respect the rules of your space. But the more you are afraid, the more power that gives them. So the best thing you can do is just to be like sovereign in your space and have courage and firm boundaries. Now, this was an interesting thing, and I want to say it's also Sylvia Brown that came up with this. So those of you that like to work with angels, Archangel Michael is like the bouncer of the angels. If you need somebody removed, Archangel Michael is your man. But she talked about a particular sect of angels that kind of rolled with Archangel Michael, if you will, called the Carians. And it was the job of the Carians to help escort spirits away, and spirits and entities away. So if you do have a spirit or an entity that you want to leave you, to take it away, Archangel Michael and the Carians can take care of that for you.
Yeah, and also you could call in your family minister who might be able to come and pray for the spirit's soul, or call in a priest to do an exorcism. That's the thing. I mean, I know we see it in movies, but the Catholic Church takes that very seriously, and they will send priests to your home to exorcise spirits. Really, if your goal is to get rid of spirits, don't talk about them in your home. So don't, when you hear something or see something, don't immediately get on your phone and call your girlfriend and say, hey, this just happened, because that also increases their power if they're trying to psych you out or something like that. So that's pretty much all about ghosts, but I wanted to share some of my favorite famous haunted places. And one of those, I've never been to this place, but it's on my list of places to see. It's in San Jose, California. It's called the Winchester Mansion. And you may have heard, actually all these places you may have heard of. Sarah Winchester, she's the heiress to the Winchester fortune, the Winchester rifle fortune. And she went to a medium who channeled her late husband. Her late husband supposedly said that she must move west. She was somewhere on the East Coast, and I can't recall where, but telling her that she needs to move west and build a home for herself and the spirits of the people who were killed by the rifles they produced. So if you've got a medium telling you that there are all these spirits that want you to go and build a house in the West, because, literally hundreds, possibly thousands, possibly more, were killed by the rifles this company produced. So she moved to San Jose and began building the house. It's actually a mansion in 1886. And the thing is, she was also told that the spirits wanted her to keep building.
Consistently, right?
She yes, constantly. There had to always be construction going, because if it stopped, that would make them angry. And she didn't want to make them angry. These people were killed with the guns that her family made. She began building it in 1886, and the construction continued to her death, which was in 1922. So she lived to a ripe old age. Some of the things about this mansion, it wasn't just an ordinary old mansion. At one point, it was up to 7 stories high. There was an earthquake that happened, and it ruined some of the things, and it's now actually 4 stories high. But at the time of its peak, it had 161 rooms and still only 1 working toilet.
Wow.
7 stories high with 1 working toilet. But she did it on purpose because she wanted to confuse the spirits. So there are plenty of toilets, plenty of bathrooms, but only one that worked, and she knew which one it was. I guess that was the one place she really wanted to get away from the ghosts. You go to Google Images and find some pictures. There are strange staircases that lead to nowhere, like they lead up to the top, the ceiling. And sometimes they're exterior doors in some of the higher floors that if you open them, you'd fall to the ground immediately on your first step. But there are some haunted reportings. Now, in my research, I couldn't find a lot of specifics other than things like footsteps have been heard, banging doors and voices, the ghost of a handyman repairing a fireplace, and several others, both inside and outside on the grounds. And also Sarah Winchester herself apparently haunts the halls of the Winchester Mansion. So it's pretty cool. It's open to the public, and I'm pretty sure it's on the Register of Historic Places.
I wonder if Sarah Winchester viewed that house as unfinished business because it could never be stopped. So I wonder if that's why Sarah's ghost haunts it.
Who knows? One of my favorite places I've been many times is in Flagstaff, Arizona. There are a lot of historic buildings because this is from the Old West. It's right on Route 66. And the historical Monte Vista Hotel. It opened on January 1st of 1927. And this hotel actually has lots of ghosts that haunt it. A romantic couple dancing in the cocktail lounge. An elderly woman has been seen in a rocking chair by the window of room 305. Also a friendly bellboy that's been seen throughout the hotel. And even an elevator attendant who is a ghost. In other words, like you step into the elevator and you see him, and the elevator itself also looks old-fashioned, but it's actually a modern elevator. I can attest to the fact that it's probably as slow as an old-fashioned elevator, but I guarantee it's not an old style. One of the creepiest ghosts, there's a baby crying in the basement, and it's been heard, not necessarily seen, but the laundry staff and the maintenance staff often report hearing it. And I'd be like, no, thanks. I'll find another job. Because how do you get that out of your mind?
Right.
But the two most notorious ghosts, the two that really creep me out or creep most people out, one is called the Meat Man. Back in the 1980s. Okay, so we're not talking about that long ago, right? In the 1980s, room 220 had a boarder. There were a couple boarders in the hotel at that time, and his nickname was the Meat Man. So he used to hang meat from the chandelier in the room, and he would let it rot. Now, here's the thing. He wasn't a butcher. He didn't do that for a living. Nobody really knows why he was hanging meat. So he lived there for a while. His body was found 3 days after he died in the room. Now it's said that he haunts the room or the hotel, but that area where if you walk near the room or go in the room, sometimes you can smell meat, rancid meat or sausage smell, which I don't like a sausage smell anyway. So yeah, that's not fun. There are times the TV goes full blast or the bed linens are stripped from the bed. And probably the worst, this is the one reason why I would never stay in that room, is because people sometimes wake up in the middle of the night that are sleeping in that room and they can feel the cold male hands on their body. I'm like, no,
hard pass, right? Hard pass.
No thanks. One of the other more well-known stories from the 1940s is in room 306, where a man had brought two prostitutes to the room and they had some sort of altercation. These two prostitutes were killed and then thrown out the window of the third floor onto the cold street below, because Flagstaff can get quite cold. But the murderer, apparently he fled and he was never found. When guests stay in that room now, sometimes when they're in the room, they feel like they're being watched. Sometimes they'll wake up in the middle of the night and feel like they're being watched and they can't get back to sleep. And there are reports of male guests who wake up to feel a woman's hand covering their mouth and throat, almost as if to get revenge, I would think. And there are other places in Flagstaff also that are haunted, like the Weatherford Hotel, which is within walking distance, and that has a Zane Grey ballroom. There's an apparition that's been seen to fly around in that. And also nearby Jerome is a town that has several haunted places, including a lot of B&Bs that you can stay in, and they even have a restaurant called the Haunted Hamburger.
I know. I've been to Jerome. It's fun.
Jerome is really a cool place, actually. It's very cool, and it's not just about haunted things. It's just got a cool vibe to it, all the switchbacks, old mining town. One of the most haunted places. I almost ran out of space writing all about all the ghosts on this, and I'm not going to go through every single one. I wish I had time, but this would be the longest podcast on earth if I did. It's the Alamo in our very own state of Texas. That's obviously in San Antonio, Texas. I actually love the 2004 movie, The Alamo. That's a really cool movie. That's one of my favorite movies. One that I've actually seen. Have you ever seen it, April?
I actually have not seen that one.
Oh my gosh. It's a good movie. Of course, there's the 1960 version where John Wayne starred in that movie. And actually, John Wayne, after the movie was shot, he developed a fascination with the Alamo. And he did a lot of research for it. And it's said, actually, that his ghost is one of the ghosts that haunts the Alamo and is seen talking to some of the other ghosts around. So it's almost like he's asking them for information.
Sometimes ghosts will haunt places that they loved, not necessarily that they had tragedy with.
Right.
That's
places they've hung out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I can totally believe if John Wayne loved the Alamo that, hey, maybe he's going to hang out there.
So for those of you who don't know your Alamo history, which honestly I don't by heart, but the Battle of the Alamo took place from, or I should say the siege of the Alamo took place from February 23rd through March 6th of 1836. And what happened was 1,600 Mexican soldiers died, along with 189, which are all of the fortress's defenders. Afterwards, the bodies of the Alamo defenders were looted, dismembered, buried in mass graves, dumped into the river, or burned. Now, way before the battle happened, in the early 1700s, so 1724 to 1793, that plot of land was actually a cemetery. And there were over 1,000 people that were buried there. So it was a haunted place even before the Alamo came along.
That's a poltergeist situation right there, where you take all the headstones off, you plop something else on there, and then you've got double the ghosts.
Yeah, that's probably why there are so many.
Mm-hmm.
The first ghostly sighting about the Alamo actually occurred a few weeks after the battle ended. Mexico's Santa Anna was captured, and as a retaliation, he sent an order to his troops to completely destroy what was left of the Alamo. It is said that when those troops went and arrived at the Alamo, there were 6 apparitions in the church doorway wielding torches and telling these soldiers, do not touch the Alamo, do not touch these walls. So they kind of turned away and ran, and I would have too.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
In the 1890s, the Alamo complex was actually turned into a prison, but so many prisoners witnessed the ghostly occurrences. It actually got so bad that even the guards started refusing to patrol at night. So they ended up relocating the prison to a different area. So another famous ghost that's been seen is Davy Crockett himself with his coonskin cap holding his rifle. Also a Native American apparently comes and creeps up on people, like people in the administration building just sitting there having a meeting. Like, excuse me, can I have a donut? So that's kind of creepy. Just before the battle, now remember it started in the end of February. So every year, at about just before that time, sometimes a small blonde boy is seen in the window of a building that's now the gift shop. And sometimes he's seen walking the grounds. And it's believed that he might be one of the sons of the defenders. Many of the children and women were evacuated before the battle. So they're saying that perhaps his spirit is returning looking for his dad. Also, sometimes around the anniversary of the battle each year, people are awakened by the sound of horses galloping. One of the most interesting stories, I think, of the ghosts there, this is probably my favorite story. There was a Mexican officer. His name was General Manuel Fernandez de Castrillon. He opposed the siege. When Santa Anna, when there were a couple survivors after the main part of the battle, these survivors came to General de Castrillon, and he promised them protection. Well, Santa Anna said, forget that. Castrillon, I want you to kill them. And Castrillon's like, I refuse. I'm not doing that. So Santa Anna said, okay. And then he had his guards do it. And they actually didn't just kill them. He basically hacked their bodies to death. It's said that Manuel Castrillon's ghost is seen walking the grounds with his head down, shaking his head, and his hands behind his back like he's sad or in sorrow, which I think is just kind of really, sad. Like he's disappointed. Like he felt like he couldn't do anything, So there are so many more, like tons more. And like I said, if you go to the website, legendsofamerica.com, you can read up more about it.
Well, thanks for joining us on this ghostly episode of Spiritual Basics Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode or if you have an idea for a future episode, drop us an email at spiritualbasicspodcast@gmail.com.
And don't forget, you can also visit our website at spiritualbasicspodcast.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Spooky happenings. Bye-bye.
This has been Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen. Find full episodes on your favorite listening platform or visit spiritualbasicspodcast.com.